Welcome to the very last lecture for the best business ethics practices to implement in your organization. I want to take a little step back to this for the very last lecture. Go back to the very first discussion we had regarding Chapter 1, Why Be Ethical? And I note in that chapter the competitive advantages are bottom line oriented, that ethical organizations financially outperform unethical organizations because people prefer working for ethical organizations and they prefer doing business with ethical organizations. But also you want to be ethical because it's just good to be ethical. And there's a lot of benefits to just being ethical because we have only really one life to live. And in that one life that we live, we want to improve ourselves as much as we can because that's the legacy that we leave. I want to get a little personal up front before discussing ultimately the purpose of life and why this is all very meaningful for me and why I take business ethics so seriously. And I really dedicated my life to teaching, giving talks, and organizing around business ethics. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, including once having so-called terminal cancer. So going back to 1995, I was teaching business ethics. I was in Europe giving some talks, and I collapsed. I was flown back to Madison, Wisconsin, went to the hospital, and within a day, they said, Dennis, you have stage 3 cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, and you're going on stage 4. And if you know cancer, stage 1 is introductory, stage 3 is you're getting near death, and stage 4, you're dead. And so I was on the verge of stage 3 going on stage 4. Hodgkin's, they don't know why you get it. And it might be environmental, it might be hereditary, but I grew up with 2 sisters, and they don't get cancer. And I always thought I'm such a bad example because I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for 30 some odd years. I meditate, I jog, I volunteer at the soup kitchen, I'm on boards, and I'm involved in the community. And now I'm dying of cancer, and that is not fair. That was not fair. And so that was a really traumatic experience. And obviously, so they told me it was terminal. This was in July of 1995. Initially, it was a 50-50 chance. Did chemo. Chemo was poisons. They were giving me 8 poisons twice a month, putting them through IVs into my veins. I lost 50 pounds, but I still continue to teach my business ethics class to executives at UW. And by January, after 4 months of chemo, they said the chemo's not working. You're going to be dead by June. So start clearing up your life, do what you got to do, tidy up things. And it just really forced me into, well, what was this life all about? Everybody dies. I mean, there's nobody you know that's not going to die. So life was very, very limited and very fragile, and you don't know when it's gonna end. And my experience because I was terminal, and I'm a nice guy, I counseled a lot of cancer patients when I was in the hospital. And there were some people that were comfortable with death, and there were other people that were scared to die. And in my discussions with them, what I realized was that the people that just accepted the fact that they were going to die, they had lived good lives. They had done the best that they could do, and they were just comfortable with the fact that they did the best that they could possibly do with the days that they were granted. When I talked to people who were afraid of dying, they had lived questionable lives. They had done some nasty things. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask forgiveness. They were stealing. They were cheating on their spouse. They were alcoholics, they were drug addicts, and they just realized they always assumed they had more time to live, and now they realized they didn't have time to live. And they were just filled with anxieties about the inevitability that death was just going to happen next week or within the month. So that just reinforced in my own mind how to make the best and most out of every day and every week. And what we do is we all work, and we spend most of our life at work. So work and organizations should be places where you experience the most ethics, not the least amount of ethics. Work should be places where you really develop your spirit. Work should be the place where you really grow your heart. And I just knew so many people that were participating in organizations that their hearts weren't growing. They were becoming resentful, they were becoming sarcastic, they were becoming cynical, and they thought they were wasting their life. But maybe the pay was good. So that got me to take business ethics even more seriously, to come up with all of these benchmarks. Obviously, I survived the cancer from 95, 96, and I was very, very grateful with that. And then after you don't have cancer for 5 years, you're viewed as being cured. So I was cured of Hodgkin's disease, so very, very fortunate. Continued to live my merry old life. And then I went to the doctor in around May of 2011, so 15, 16 years later, for a swollen hand. If you look closely, my hand is swollen. And we're trying to figure out why my hand was swollen. So they did a bunch of tests, and what they found out with the test was my cancer came back. And that was a huge shock. And the cancer had nothing to do with my swollen hand. So in terms of a framework of mind, the swollen hand was a blessing. And it's still swollen. So I had cancer again. We did more chemo, we did more radiation. And having dealt with death twice, even having dealt with death once, I became fearless. There was nothing that I was afraid of. And we're so hesitant in talking with each other about sensitive issues that I just felt essential to really run my classes in a way that are very humane, very, very collegial, or very conversational, such as these videos, because we're all in this together. We're all on this earth together. We're all in this life together. So that gets us to the purpose of life. And this is what I covered in my very last class. So what is the purpose of life? The best explanation is from Aristotle, going back to 300 BC. And Aristotle explains very well in both Nicomachean Ethics and his Politics that the purpose of life is happiness. We all want to be happy. How many of you people out there look forward to being depressed? Nobody. We want to be happy. Now, what makes me happy might be very different from what makes our director, Jessica, happy. And it might be very different than what makes you happy. But nonetheless, we want to be happy campers. And what makes the world so fascinating is that we all are very diverse in what makes us happy. But philosophers and social scientists have really focused in on this. What is this happiness all about? And Aristotle was the best. So if you want to live a happy life, Aristotle says it's 4 factors: health, wealth, intellectual virtue, and moral virtue. And what he wrote about 2,000 and 300 years ago has been proven by social scientists over and over and over again, and it's a lot of common sense. So in terms of health, people who are healthy tend to be happier than people dying of cancer. There are exceptions to the rules, and you're just going to have to deal with exceptions for the rules. So Aristotle does it for the most part. For the most part, so health is important. So if you're not happy right now, how's your health? Are you exercising enough? Are you part of a sports club? Are you a jogger? Do you do racquetball? Do you eat healthy food? So health matters a lot. Wealth also matters a lot. Wealthy people tend to be happier than people living in poverty, for the most part. And Aristotle then combines these issues. People who are healthy and wealthy tend to be happier than somebody who lived their whole life in poverty and is dying of cancer. So it's a continuum going back and forth. So you have to ask yourself, how's your wealth if you're not feeling happy? Are you earning enough money at the job that you have? And if not, do you have to ask your boss for the raise? Or are you unhappy with your wealth because you want to be a billionaire and no amount of money will make you happy? So instead, what you have to say is, I have enough money. I don't need more. Whatever money I'm making is enough, and I'm content with that. And that creates a very calm sense of happiness. I'm happy, I'm content with my income and my health. The third variable is intellectual virtue. People who are well educated tend to be happier than people who are uneducated. which is why you're probably getting an education in business ethics and creating ethical organizations. So education matters a lot. There's that saying that ignorance is bliss. Aristotle goes on and on. That's not true. If you're ignorant about things, as soon as you find something else, then you're upset that you didn't know about that before. And you would rather have known about things before. So education matters a lot. So how is your intellectual virtue? Are you learning new things? Are you reading good novels? Are you reading the bestsellers in terms of how to create ethical organizations? Are you seeing interesting movies? Are you always learning? Are you constantly learning? And if you are, you're happy. And you'll be happier than someone who's not. The fourth variable is moral virtue. People who are moral tend to be a lot happier than people who are immoral. That immoral person might steal money and get a Jaguar with that, but their conscience, believe me, does bother them. There's only so long you can deny your conscience and that inner voice and that inner spark of divinity and humanity that we have inside of all of us. Out of those four variables, health, so if you combine them all, the happiest campers in the world are healthy, wealthy, well-educated, and have done a lot of moral things. The least happiest people in the world are unhealthy, dying of cancer, uneducated, sick their whole life, not learning anything new, and they've done a lot of bad things. And we're somewhere in between, and most people are somewhere in between the two. Then Aristotle, going on in his conversational ways, out of those four variables, what matters the most is moral virtue. That even if you're living in poverty and you're sick, like some of the people I saw in the hospitals that I was counseling, if you live the moral life, there's this aura of happiness about you, because that mattered a lot. You've practiced kindness throughout your life, and you realize, therefore, life was meaningful to do. Next, Aristotle plays with moral virtue. By moral, what does it mean to be moral? Aristotle says, first, it means you're kind toward yourself. Going back to egoism, you got to be nice to yourself. Don't just judge yourself. Don't be overwhelmed by guilt. Be kind to yourself. Serve yourself. So Aristotle plays with love and service. You want to love yourself. You want to be deserving of love. So therefore, love yourself and be kind to yourself and serve yourself. If I need to write every day because that makes me happy, then find time every day when I can do my writing. Next, Aristotle says you got to love and serve your spouse. So don't just love and serve yourself, but love and serve your spouse. And then you got to love and serve your children. And then that creates a loving and service-minded family. And then you need to love and serve your neighbor. And then you need to love and serve your community. You need to love and serve your state. You need to love and serve your nation. And you need to love and serve all the nations of the world. And when you get into that zone and into that frame, you get a certain kind of bliss that allows you to just set aside all the stress and all the obstacles and all the problems and say, I can do anything. I can conquer anything. I can create the most ethical organizations. We can become as profitable as could be in a good way. So that'll derive happiness from an Aristotelian perspective. What does this mean? If you're unhappy right now, check out your health, check out your wealth, check out your intellectual virtue, check out your moral virtue. If you're a manager, I visit a lot of organizations, and some organizations have a lot of happy employees. Some organizations, everybody's depressed. They don't want to be there. Work is a pain in the neck. In that case, if you're the manager, and you want to have, as a manager, I want to go to a place where people are happy. Of course, that are profitable and performing well, but are also happy. So therefore, ask yourself, are your employees healthy? Maybe they work too many hours. Maybe they're overstressed. So do a gym, limit the number of hours they can work. I once worked for an organization where I told all my employees, you can't work more than 50 hours a week. And if I find out that you're working more than that behind my back, you're not going to get a bonus. That 50 enough is And if you're not good enough to do it in 50 hours, we're going to have to replace you. And this organization isn't good for you. So you want to check that out. Check out the wealth of your employees. Are they content with the wage scales that they're receiving? Check out the intellectual virtue of your employees. You can start a book club at work. Read novels, read new books. And then check out the moral virtue of your employees. In that sense, do what I mentioned in chapter 12, have teams, and as a team, let's all serve meals at the free soup kitchen. And then that's a great and wonderful experience. And basically, as everything else, you do this through assessments because we pay attention to what we measure. So you can do health, wealth, intellectual virtue, moral virtue on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. And you can survey your employees and see how happy they are on these 4 variables that matter a great deal for many people. And as based upon my experience, life can be very short and sweet. So don't put off being happy and try to integrate happiness and satisfaction and meaningful work beginning today into your life. And I wish you well in doing that. So thank you for being a wonderful student. If you have any questions, just email me through this system.